Here is a wild fact. The second most translated book in human history is not the Bible, not the Quran, and not Shakespeare. It is an 81-chapter poem written 2,500 years ago by an old man in China who probably did not even exist, and the reason it keeps getting translated is that people cannot stop finding it useful. The Tao Te Ching is traditionally attributed to a man named Lao Tzu, which translates roughly as Old Master. The story goes that he was a keeper of archives in ancient China who got fed up with the corruption and chaos of society and decided to leave civilization entirely. On his way out, a gatekeeper stopped him and asked him to write down his wisdom before disappearing. Lao Tzu supposedly sat down and wrote the Tao Te Ching in one session, then left and was never seen again. Historians are pretty sure that story is not literally true. The text was probably compiled over centuries by multiple authors, and Lao Tzu may be a composite figure or a symbolic name. But the uncertainty does not matter. What matters is the text itself. The Tao Te Ching has been translated into more languages than any book except the Bible. It is the founding text of Taoism, and it influenced Chinese culture, philosophy, medicine, art, and politics for over 2,000 years. That does not happen by accident. The central concept of the entire book is the Tao, which is notoriously difficult to translate. The word means path, way, or road, but the opening line of the text says that the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. If you can describe it in words, you have already missed it. This is not mystical nonsense. It is a statement about the limits of language when applied to something as fundamental as the pattern of nature itself. Think of it this way. The Tao is the natural order, the way things actually work when you stop forcing them. It is the flow of a river finding the lowest ground, the way a tree grows without instructions, the rhythm of day and night. You do not control it, you do not create it, but you can align with it, or you can fight it and make yourself miserable. That choice is yours, and the entire book is basically a user manual for choosing the first option. The Tao Te Ching uses water as the central metaphor. Water is soft and yielding, but it carves through stone. It flows around obstacles instead of confronting them directly. It settles into the lowest places that no one else wants, and yet nothing is more powerful. Lao Tzu says that the highest good is like water, benefiting all things without contention. This is not passivity, it is strategic softness. It is strength without rigidity. If you are getting something out of this, subscribe to the channel. We break down ancient wisdom texts and apply them to modern life. Links to the full Tao Te Ching and more resources are in the description below. The big practical idea in the Tao Te Ching is something called Wu Wei, which translates as non-action or effortless action. This gets misunderstood a lot. It does not mean do nothing and let life happen to you. It means act without forcing, move without strain, accomplish things without unnecessary effort. Like when you are in a state of flow and everything just clicks. That is Wu Wei. The opposite is the grinding hustle where everything feels like pushing a boulder uphill. Wu Wei does not mean laziness. It means choosing the path of least resistance intelligently. A skilled carpenter does not force the chisel through the wood against the grain. They find the grain and work with it. A good negotiator does not force agreement through sheer pressure. They find where interests naturally align and guide the conversation there. Wu Wei is acting in harmony with the structure of reality rather than against it. The Tao Te Ching applies this to leadership. The best leader, it says, is one whose existence is barely noticed by the people. When the work is done and the goal achieved, the people say we did it ourselves. This is the opposite of the charismatic dominating leader who makes every decision a display of personal power. The Taoist leader arranges conditions so that things naturally unfold in the right direction, then gets out of the way. Here's another major theme: simplicity. Lao Tzu is not a fan of complexity, ambition, or the constant accumulation of more stuff. He says that those who know do not speak, and those who speak do not know. He says that in the pursuit of learning, every day something is acquired, but in the pursuit of the Tao, every day something is dropped. The whole text is pushing you toward less, not more. Fewer desires, fewer possessions, fewer complications. This is radically countercultural in the modern world, where the default assumption is that progress means adding. Add skills, add income, add experiences, add followers. The Tao Te Ching says the opposite. It says that when you have nothing left to subtract, you have arrived. The uncarved block is the recurring image. Before you carve the wood into something specific and limited, it has infinite possibility. Simplicity is not poverty. It is freedom from unnecessary constraints. Lao Tzu also talks about letting go of outcomes. He says that the sage does not hoard, and the more they give to others, the greater their abundance. The more they give away, the more they possess. This sounds paradoxical until you realize he is not talking about material wealth. He is talking about the psychological cost of clinging. When you hold tightly to things, people, and outcomes, you create suffering for yourself. When you hold lightly, you remain free. One of the most counterintuitive ideas in the text is that yielding is stronger than rigidity. Lao Tzu says that whatever is flexible and flowing will tend to grow, while whatever is rigid and blocked will wither and die. He points out that a living person is soft and flexible, while a corpse is stiff and hard. Trees that bend in the wind survive storms. Trees that resist get uprooted. If you have ever been in an argument where the other person dug in their heels, you know exactly what this means. The harder they insist they are right, the more brittle the position becomes. The person who can say, maybe I am wrong here, let me think about that person is actually in a stronger position. They can adapt, they can learn. Rigidity looks like strength, but it is actually fragility pretending to be solid. The Tao Te Ching applies this to conflict resolution. It says that the best way to overcome an enemy is not through direct confrontation, but through yielding at the right moment. If someone pushes hard, step aside and let their momentum carry them past you. If someone attacks, absorb the force and redirect it. This is the foundation of martial arts like Tai Chi and Aikido, both of which draw directly from Taoist philosophy. Think about how much energy people burn trying to control things they cannot actually control. Traffic, other people's opinions, outcomes that depend on luck, the past. All of that is wasted effort. The Tao Te Ching is basically a 2,500-year-old manual for distinguishing between what you can influence and what you need to let go of. Spoiler, most of what you worry about is in the second category. Lao Tzu has zero patience for ego. He says that those who stand on tiptoe do not stand firm, and those who take the longest strides do not walk the fastest. He says that showing off brings no light, and self-promotion brings no respect. The person who brags is like someone trying to eat more than they can digest. It looks ridiculous and it does not actually nourish them. The emphasis on humility is not about self-hatred or false modesty. It is about seeing yourself clearly without distortion. The sage, according to the Tao Te Ching, puts themselves last and ends up in front. They remain outside of competition and therefore no one can compete with them. This is not a moral prescription about being nice. It is a practical observation about how power and influence actually work when you strip away the theatrics. Lao Tzu also warns about the danger of desire. He says that there is no greater misfortune than wanting more, and no greater fault than discontent. The constant hunger for the next thing, the next achievement, the next possession, is what keeps people trapped in suffering. Contentment, he says, is true wealth. Not because you have everything, but because you no longer need more than you have. The Tao Te Ching loves paradox. It says things like, the softest thing in the world can overcome the hardest. It says that he who knows does not speak, and he who speaks does not know. It says that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, which sounds like a motivational poster now, but it was originally a point about the relationship between grand ambitions and immediate action. The text is full of these reversals, and they are not word games. They are designed to shake you out of conventional thinking. One of the most famous paradoxes is about the empty space at the center of useful things. Lao Tzu points out that a bowl is useful not because of the clay, but because of the empty space inside. A house is useful not because of the walls, but because of the empty space they enclose. Emptiness, he argues, is not a deficiency, it is what makes things functional. In the same way, mental and emotional space, not constant activity and stimulation, is what allows you to think, feel, and respond intelligently. The text also uses paradox to describe the Tao itself. It says the Tao is something blurred and indistinct, yet within it are images. It is dark and dim, yet within it is a vital force. This is not poetic vagueness. It is an attempt to describe something that resists direct description. The Tao is the background against which everything else appears. You cannot point to it directly because it is what makes pointing possible. So how do you actually apply this to your life? First, try the Wu Wei practice. Pick one area where you have been forcing things and grinding with effort. Ask, is there a way to accomplish the same goal with less strain? Not by lowering the standard, but by finding a smarter path. Often the most efficient route is not the most obvious one. Water does not flow uphill no matter how hard you push. It finds the lowest path and gets there effortlessly. Second, practice subtraction. Every week, try removing one thing instead of adding one. Delete an app you scroll mindlessly. Cancel a subscription you do not use. Say no to one obligation that does not genuinely matter. The Tao Te Ching says that in pursuit of the Tao, every day something is dropped. You do not have to go full minimalist monk. Just see what it feels like to simplify one thing at a time and notice whether that creates space or just creates anxiety. Third, pay attention to where you are being rigid when flexibility would serve you better. This is especially useful in relationships and conflicts. Next time you feel yourself digging in and insisting you are absolutely right, pause and ask, am I being firm because the principle genuinely matters, or am I being rigid because my ego got involved? The Tao Te Ching would say that the difference between those two is the difference between strength and brittleness. One thing the text does not give you is easy answers or step-by-step instructions. It is deliberately vague in places. That is on purpose. Lao Tzu is not trying to give you a system to follow. He is trying to get you to see reality more clearly so you can respond to it intelligently in your own specific circumstances. The whole point is that the Tao cannot be fully captured in words, so any attempt to turn it into a fixed doctrine misses the spirit of the thing. It is also worth noting that the Tao Te Ching is profoundly not dogmatic. It does not demand belief in gods or supernatural forces. It does not promise rewards or threaten punishments. It does not claim to have the only truth. It simply describes how things are and suggests that aligning with that reality tends to produce better results than fighting it. That is why it translates so well across cultures. You do not have to be Chinese, or ancient, or religious to find it useful. The book has influenced an enormous range of thinkers and practitioners. Taoist philosophy shaped Chinese medicine, martial arts, landscape painting, poetry, and governance for millennia. In the West, it influenced writers like Ursula K. Le Guin and Alan Watts. It has been adopted by environmentalists, leadership consultants, therapists, and people just trying to reduce their stress. The core insight, that you can work with reality instead of against it, keeps turning out to be useful. Here is the thing about the Tao Te Ching. It is short. You can read it in an afternoon. It is simple. Each chapter is only a few lines, but it is also one of those texts that you can come back to over and over and keep finding new layers. You will read one chapter at 20 and think it is about rivers. You will read the same chapter at 40 and realize it is about your relationship with control. That is what makes a classic. Not that it says one thing perfectly, but that it keeps saying new things depending on where you are when you read it. Tomorrow I distill Lao Tzu into one 60-second practice you can try immediately. This video was created by combining human research and scriptwriting with AI-assisted visuals and production. Links to translations and more resources are in the description below. Here is the thing about the Tao Te Ching. It is short. You can read it in an afternoon. It is simple. Each chapter is only a few lines, but it is also one of those texts that you can come back to over and over and keep finding new layers. You will read one chapter at 20 and think it is about rivers. You will read the same chapter at 40 and realize it is about your relationship with control. That is what makes a classic. Not that it says one thing perfectly, but that it keeps saying new things depending on where you are when you read it. Tomorrow I distill Lao Tzu into one 60-second practice you can try immediately. This video was created by combining human research and scriptwriting with AI-assisted visuals and production. Links to translations and more resources are in the description below.